Welcome back. I hope everybody had a great spring break. And as you know, we are physically out of school for the rest of the year, but we still have school. So, but like I did last time, I'll give you enough time to kind of get this stuff in. I understand that you have six other classes that you're trying to work on. So I'm not going to try to bombard you with a lot of work. All right. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We talked about Richard Nixon, Ford, and Carter in the last PowerPoint. So now we're going to pick up with Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bill Clinton. And those are the presidents from right to left. That's Reagan, that's Bush, and that's Clinton. Okay. And so we're just going to pick up where we left off with the 1980 election. All right. I'm going to check one thing real quick, make sure that my phone is recording. Okay. Making sure that everything's good to go. All right, so let's look at the election of 1980. It was Carter, who is the incumbent president, and he is seeking re-election. He's trying to get a second term in office, and he's running against Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is a very popular individual. He's popular because he was an actor. He was popular because he was the governor of California. He's conservative, and the country just clings to him like a drowning man to a raft. And if you look at the electoral map of 1980, I mean, Carter didn't have a snowball's chance in Hades of winning. Okay. And remember, I told you the election of 1976 is the last time that Mississippi went blue, voted Democrat. And you can see this is where Mississippi began to start voting Republican. One of the things that many people feel that hurt Carter's reelection chances was the two things: the disastrous rescue attempt of trying to get the hostages out of the hands of Iran, okay, of the Iranian revolutionaries. It was a huge, disastrous fiasco. And a lot of people said that's kind of what did it in. It was like nothing seemed to go wrong in Carter's administration. And then this failed rescue attempt. He's not flying the plane. He's not the one. He has nothing to do with the weather conditions, wind conditions, or anything like that. But because he is president of the United States, he will get blamed for that. I said two things, and actually that's like the biggest thing. The other thing was it was just continuous, just nothing seemed to go right for Carter. And then up to the day of inauguration, those hostages will stay in captivity, and Iran waits for the all call that Reagan is now in office, and that's when they release the hostages. So Carter just didn't work out for him. All right. But Reagan wins by a huge landslide, and he is uber popular, and he is going to kind of ride this wave of popularity for the next 8 years. It seemed like there was a lot of stuff that went down in Reagan's administration, but Reagan none of it sticks to him. Okay. So he's a very popular president in a lot of households. All right, so Reagan won the election of 1980. His VP will be George Herbert Walker Bush, okay? And before, Reagan's going to implement laissez-faire economics. He begins to deregulate. We're going to look at that in the next two slides. But before Reagan even really gets comfortable in the White House, even before he really gets acclimated to the White House, there is an assassination attempt on his life, okay? Reagan is outside. He's in D.C. The picture to your left, he's waving to the crowds. And within seconds, he will be shot. They immediately get him into the car and hustle him off to the hospital. And Reagan was hurt a whole lot worse than the White House let on. They really did not kind of let the American people know that Reagan was as bad off as he was. Daddy Bush, took a little criticism. He would not, what's the word I'm looking for, enact the 25th Amendment while Reagan was in surgery, while Reagan was under the gas. He didn't want to look like he was taking advantage of a bad situation. Some people kind of thought that was weak of President Bush, but he was like, no, I think it's a bad look that I'm trying to seize power while this man is, fighting for his life. But one of the people close to Reagan, his press secretary, does get hurt very, very bad. I mean, he is left with permanent damage, mentally and physically. Mentally, he has memory loss. Physically, he cannot walk. He will be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And because of this, Brady becomes a huge advocate of gun rights legislation, and which will result eventually in the passing of the Brady Bill. I want to say that some of the Brady Bill has been repealed. I think they do a background check, but I think you can get a gun on the spot. But initially, the Brady Bill was you had to have a background check, a federal background check, and a 5-day waiting period. And I think some of that has changed. Okay. Gun people see the Brady Bill as gun regulation. They don't like gun regulation. They think any and everybody should have a weapon. And some people are like, well, we need to make sure that people that have mental illness don't get weapons, felons, and all this other stuff. So it's a political hot potato, and it's very personal on which side of the line you fall on when it comes to gun regulation. And it's a regulation. It's not saying they're taking guns away. But anyway, okay. So, Reagan's administration will be viewed as, he goes back to this laissez-faire economics, okay? Deregulation. Remember, when you hear that word deregulation, that's laissez-faire, okay? That's laissez-faire. When you hear regulation, that's the opposite of laissez-faire. That means the government is trying to clamp down, trying to regulate businesses, hold them responsible, make them adhere to rules. Well, during Reagan's administration, there was a lot of deregulation, okay? And economists will look at some of this deregulation after the 2008 economic crash. A lot of them will research when did a lot of these problems start, and they'll go back to Reagan's administration, okay? Reagan will also, like Hoover, implement trickle-down economics. He called it supply-side economics. And the idea is taking care of the people that create jobs. And that does make sense. Help the people, the job creators, because if they're not, and when we're talking about job creators, we're talking about like big box stores. We're talking about, we're just talking about businesses that generate and create a lot of jobs, chain stores, chain businesses around the country. But the problem is if you give them so much, you're not leaving enough for Main Street America. And the idea that they're going to share, that you're going to give them, and hopefully they'll share it with Main Street America, it doesn't work. And that's not personal opinion. That's verifiable information. You can go find the facts that trickle-down economics ultimately, historically, has never won. Okay, it has never worked. But Reagan sticks with it. He likes his supply-side economics. He doesn't call it trickle-down economics, supply-side economics. Okay. So big business, the wealthy, they're going to kind of have like a boom during Reagan's administration because he's, the whole deregulation and the trickle-down economics, there's a little boom there for corporate America in that top 1% to 2%. Okay. All right. In 1983, Reagan's going to have a press conference, and he kind of takes everybody by surprise when he talks about implementing a strategic defense initiative system called Star Wars. It had been discussed, and to some extent, they had even tried to begin working on it, but it wasn't really a practical idea. The idea behind Star Wars was that you put laser beams up in space, or you put mirrors up in space that can reflect, that can bounce off laser beams to shoot down incoming missiles. Okay, great idea, but it surprised the people around him, his advisors, because it was something that they had discussed. It was something that they were looking into researching, but it's not something that they had settled on. So a lot of people were like, what the heck is this dude talking about? But the people that were listening was the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union hears Reagan talking about putting laser beams up in space to bounce off mirrors to shoot down incoming missiles, they're like, oh my goodness, they're getting serious. They're taking this weaponry up to a new level. So Russia is going to almost bankrupt itself trying to create something similar to Star Wars. But it's not something that we kind of dropped anchor in, Okay, so it kind of, his talking out the side of his neck was ended up being very good, for us, advantageous for us, because it kind of, Russia's going to suffer some economic problems because of it. But it made a lot of people kind of look at Reagan sideways, like, what is this dude talking about? Now, even though we never get the Star Wars initiative off the ground, there will be a land-based version called the Patriot missile, which can shoot and then knock down incoming missiles or try to intercept incoming missiles. The Patriot missile was used during the first Gulf War, okay? And I'm sure they have used it since then, but that's when it was first introduced. All right. A huge scandal broke out in the mid-'80s in Reagan's administration. Hold on a second, people. Let me check something. All right, I'm just making sure it's still recording. All right, a huge scandal broke out in the mid-'80s in Reagan's administration. All right. Now, Reagan at the time was the oldest president ever elected. He was 69 years old, I believe. Trump has beat him. But he was the oldest president ever elected. And he was like this whole grandfather type. So there wasn't really a lot, Reagan could get up there and he was an actor. So homeboy knew how to turn on the charm. He knew how to tell a quick joke. He always had a quick, retort, and that kind of made him very, very popular. So when people would hear things coming out of Reagan's administration, they'd be like, oh no, not Reagan. He's so friendly and fun. It doesn't seem like it's something that that doesn't sound like something he would do. But one of the things that came out in Reagan's administration was the Iran-Contra affair, okay? And what the Iran-Contra affair was in a nutshell, all right, was this. The United States was caught selling weapons to Iran and then taking that money and giving it to the Contras in South America, okay, in Nicaragua. The Contras were fighting against the Marxist government. And so, against a already established law passed by Congress, the Bolin Agreement, the Iran-Contra arms sales kind of did an end run around the Bolin Amendment. And when this got out, all Hades broke loose, okay? All Hades broke loose because there were several things going on here. Congress had said, we will not interfere in what is going on in Nicaragua. Okay, that's an internal problem. And then we're selling weapons to our enemy, Iran. Remember, Iran had our hostages for 444 days only a couple of years before this. So there's just a lot of things going on here. And when all this comes out, everybody starts pointing fingers. Everybody starts denying. Everybody starts, looking at studying their shoelaces. And people, this turned into a three-ring circus. The summer this broke, I think it was the summer of 85 or 86. The summer that this broke, it interrupted soap operas that entire summer. Game shows. It was like morning and afternoon TV was done for. Everything was about this scandal. And there was congressional hearings and people throwing each other up under the bus and the whole kit and caboodle. Okay? Now, Reagan said he knew nothing about it. And people, the country unanimously said, oh, he said he didn't know anything about it. He didn't know anything about it. Okay? And so he was believed. The man that at the end of the day that gets stuck holding the bag is Oliver North. That's the man right there on your left. Okay. So it was like everybody was pointing fingers at each other, but it all came down to Oliver North. All right. So this is a huge scandal. And this is a very dangerous scandal because what happens with this is when the United States was caught selling weapons to Iran, an ally that we had, Saddam Hussein, is now that deteriorates our relationship with Saddam Hussein. Okay, the same Saddam Hussein that we will go into Kuwait to push out, the same Saddam Hussein that baby Bush goes into Iraq to oust from power. That Saddam Hussein was an ally at one point. Well, now with this Iranian gun sales, it begins to create a huge rift between between him and the Western powers, the Western countries. And so it kind of gets ugly. Okay? All right. Now, remember, this is the Cold War. This is still all falls under the umbrella of the Cold War. And Reagan is seen as the one of the last big Cold Warriors. You know, Gorbachev tear down that wall. He gets credit for the wall coming down, even though it took place in Herbert Walker Bush's administration. So while, you know, Reagan is implementing laissez-faire and supply-side economics and, you know, talking about Star Wars and all this other stuff, Mikhail Gorbachev in the Soviet Union, he's trying to implement a softer side of communism. Okay? So he implements some reforms. Glasnost and perestroika. Okay? And a lot of people blame Glasnost and perestroika and those two policies along with Gorbachev for the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union, because what Glasnost and perestroika did was it gave the Soviets a glimpse of freedom. It gave them a taste of freedom. Okay? All right, openness and transparency, which the Soviet Union has never been known for. Okay, the restructuring of Soviet economic and political policy. That means some of the balance is shifting. It's not all staying at the top. Well, once the Soviet people get a little bit of taste of freedom, a little bit of sniff of what it may seem like, they want it. They don't want it piecemeal. They're going to want it. Okay. And so a lot of people said that it was those two policies that just kind of helped bring on the collapse of the Soviet Union. But at some point, people just get tired of a foot on their neck. At some point, people get tired of the foot on their neck, and they're gonna revolt. They're gonna overthrow, and that's kind of what happens. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in Daddy Bush's administration. All right. Just like every president before him, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan is going to, you know, be a member of arms control treaties. Okay. All right, 1983, a military base in Lebanon was attacked and 220 plus Marines were killed. This was serious and it was major, but it's also kind of a precursor to this war on terror that's slowly beginning to evolve. Okay, this war on terror. Now, we don't really see that war on terror, that's not even a term they were going to use until until Bush's administration, you know, after 9/11. But our problems in the Middle East don't just crop up overnight, okay? Just don't crop up overnight. All right. Reagan will be the first man president to appoint a female to the Supreme Court. Hold on, let me check my recorder. And that is Sandra Day O'Connor, okay? And people, this is huge. Okay, I don't have a date for you. Let me see if I can look up a date while I'm looking this up, while I'm talking to you. But Sandra Day O'Connor will be the first woman to the Supreme Court. And as of today, we've had 4 women on the Supreme Court. And 3 of them are still on the Supreme Court. And hold on, let me put this down real quick and look up Sandra Day O'Connor and see when she was Sandra Day O'Connor and see when she was appointed. Let me see. Hold on a second. I'm looking at it. September 25th, 1981. Okay, so he did this in his first year. All right, this is huge. This is very, very major. Okay, Sandra Day O'Connor. And if you look at the women on the bottom, that's Sandra Day O'Connor, and that those are the 3 women still on the Supreme Court. So from left to right, Sandra Day O'Connor, Sonia Sotomayor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Donna Keegan. Okay, and Sandra Day O'Connor is still alive. Yeah, thought she was. All right. All right, Sally Ride will be the first American woman in space in 1983, 21 years after the Soviets launched a woman in space. So, you know, it took us 21 years to catch up with the Soviets when it came to equality in space. But Sally Ride will be the first woman in space. Also, in that same year, the United States will launch its first African American into space, Guy Bluford. Okay? All right. Reagan will win his re-election bid in 1984 against Walter Mondale. All right. Again, look at the political map. I mean, there was not even any competition. I don't even think, looking at this, I don't even think Dukakis got his home state of Massachusetts. So there was just, it was a shoe-in for Bush. I mean, for Reagan, I'm sorry. Also, this election is historic. This is an historic election. And it's historic because for the first time on a major ticket, a woman is on the ticket. Geraldine Ferraro is on the ticket as Mondale's vice president. People, this is huge. Okay, and I remember this. This was, a lot of women were like, rah, rah, I am woman, hear me roar. Okay, a woman is on the political ticket, on the ticket. We won't see this again until 2008 when Sarah Palin is on the Republican ticket for the vice presidency for John McCain's VP, nominee. And then in 2016 when Hillary Clinton is at the top of the Democratic ticket. Okay, so there's still a lot of firsts for women when it comes in politics and minorities in general. Okay, so this is huge. So that's why that is historic. All right. So even though Mondale didn't have a chance of winning, there is a woman on the Democratic ticket. Women are slowly choo-choo moving. Okay. All right, January 28th, 1986, a very solemn day for the United States. This was the day that the space shuttle went in space, the Space Shuttle Challenger. And this wasn't just any, and that was part of the problem with NASA. I'm just saying this wasn't just any launch into space. Any launch into space should be significant. We should be awe-inspired. But just like everything else, when people get used to something, they stop appreciating it. So we put a man on the moon in 1969. We sent other people to the moon after that. Then we stopped going to the moon, and then after everything just kind of became, we're in space again. We're in space again, and people kind of lost their enthusiasm for the space program. So NASA's trying to excite people, get everybody excited, and they will they want to launch an educator into space. And so over 13,000 people, teachers, submit applications to be that teacher, be that educator that is selected by NASA to go into space. And they narrowed down those 13,000 applications to one elementary school teacher, Christy McCullough. Okay. And she trained to go into space, and she was on that fateful trip, January 28th, 1986. And 72 seconds into its launch, it exploded. Her parents were out there, her students, some students were there, some students were watching it around the country. People were watching it on television. My brother was in the ROTC program at Biloxi High at the time, and they had gone out to Stennis Space Center to watch it. And he said when it blew up, they initially thought, wait a minute, is this part of the launch? Does this normally happen? Until everybody, all of the people that worked at NASA runs in, because it's like on a big, huge IMAX screen. They run in and start looking. They're like, oh my God, this wasn't supposed to happen. This happened, the day this happened was the day that Reagan was originally slated to give his State of the Union address. And so that night, he doesn't give his State of the Union address, but he will address the country. And people, a lot of presidents wear so many different hats. Presidents they have to worry about the economy, unemployment. They've got to worry about other countries trying to do us harm. They've got to worry about, does our country have enough of this? There is no job that you can have prior to going into the White House to prepare you for the job that you have to do. So one of the jobs that presidents also have to do is sometimes they got to be the father. They have to be daddy. And on this night, whether or not you hated Reagan, you loved Reagan, you voted for him, you didn't vote for him, on January 28th, 1986, that night, Reagan will go on television and he will talk to the country, and it's less than 5 minutes. And it's one of the greatest instances of presidential leadership that you will find. It's his job is to put the country at ease, because this was huge. Also, it's a little embarrassing too. We are the mighty U.S. Why our ships on our space shuttles not supposed to be exploding? And that's not supposed to happen. All right. So, I put the link in here, and I hope that you can open the link. But if you can't, just put Reagan and the space shuttle Challenger, and you can find the speech. And it is absolutely fabulous. And the last 12 seconds of the speech, I'll always tear up because he quotes a poem. All right. So, Reagan, like I said, loved him, hated him. On this day, he was everybody's president. And a lot of times, tragic events have a tendency of pulling a country together. Even if it's only for a hot second, it pulls the country together. So that was, this was a very horrible, this is a sad day, but it also was a day that our country, for just briefly, was kind of united. Okay? All right, so we're going to go into the election of 1988. So Reagan has served 2 terms, okay? It should also be noted, too, that Reagan will die in 2003, I believe, if I'm correct. I'm not going to stop and look it up, but I think it's 2003 because I remember watching the whole funeral and stuff on television. He will die from complications of Alzheimer's, and it has been debated ever since then. Did he have Alzheimer's when he was in office? His son says he did. His advisor said he didn't, but they would say he didn't, because if you see that your president is compromised, it would have been their job to say, hey, he's got memory lapse and stuff like that. But anyway, so that's important to note. I don't think anything has ever demonstrated, anything has ever come out that he wasn't able to make solid choices and stuff like that. Although some people really felt that Reagan's administration, that he was the face, and there were powers behind him that were kind of pulling the strings, which is why he said, I didn't know anything about the Iran-Contra crisis, the Iran-Contra gun sales. A lot of people said he probably didn't know anything about it, which is that's kind of scary by itself, okay? All right, so he served 8 years. So when the election of 1988 rolls around, his vice president will run. And there is no reason for anybody to think that his vice president will not have a great chance of winning, because he is on, he served with a popular president. They had a very good relationship. Reagan endorses him. Hey, boom. And if you can look at the political map, Bush did not have any true hassle getting into the White House. So he wins the election of 1988. Okay? All right? There's a lot happening out there in the communist world. A student pro-democracy movement was crushed by China. The Berlin Wall is coming down. There's a lot of stuff that took place in Bush's 4 years. And he is only a one-term president. And we'll talk about that. Okay? All right. So Tiananmen Square. So this is not even a year into Bush's administration. And again, this doesn't really have anything to do with Bush. Bush doesn't incite this, but this is something, China is becoming a major power. China's on the come up. And so the world's looking at this, and this is huge. China has a population of over 1 billion people at this time. They're almost close to 2 billion. They're a little over, they're on the other side of 1.5 billion. So you have a population of 1 billion people protesting. That makes for interesting news and regime change, shift in power. So the world is looking at this. All right. So, but Bush himself, doesn't really have anything to do with this. But this was the Tiananmen Square protest massacre in the last from April 15th to June 4th. And it was a student-led protest in Beijing. Okay. To this day, no one has exact numbers of the people that were killed. Probably the names of people that were killed. Okay. And the man on your left, on the right, you see those 4 tanks lined up. There is a man standing. He was called Tank Man, I believe. He's standing in front of that tank. Also, on this one, I've also embedded a link. If y'all cannot open up the link, then you pull up Tiananmen Tank Man, and it should pop up. But what he does is, and we don't know to this day what this dude's name is. He stands in front of this tank. He's a student. He has his jacket in his hand, and he will not let the tank pass. Okay, this one man he's trying to stand up against this, what is considered this just harsh, brutal regime. He's standing in front of this tank. He at one point will climb up on the tank. He's gonna knock on the hatch of the tank. Okay, the tank moves and tries to get around him. He stands in front of it. It tries to get around him in the other way. He stands in front of it. Okay, what came of this man? What happened to this man? You can look it up. There's a lot of theories, but I don't think there's any valid proof of what happened to the tank man. Now, remember, China is a country. They have a mixed economy. They are communist politically, which is what the students are protesting. Economically, they're kind of socialist capitalist, if that makes sense. So they are tri-mixture, all right? So it's a little socialism and a little communism and a little capitalism. They want to earn it. They want the money. They want ownership. But they also have social services. But they also have a lockdown on any type of government criticism. Their social media is monitored. Their access to what they can, the information to what they can access on the internet is monitored. Ms. Bosard said that her parents went to China about maybe 10 years ago. Could have been a little bit more than that or less than that. And she said when they were in Beijing that their tour guide was like, don't ask about Tiananmen Square. Don't make reference to it. Don't ask anybody around you. Because it's just something that they don't talk about. And I was reading up on that a couple of months ago. I was reading something. It was like there's kids your age in China that don't know about Tiananmen Square, but we know on the outside know. All right. So this is huge. When you have a country with over 1 billion people and a country that is nuclear power, and there's this possible, power shift and regime change. So the world was focused on Tiananmen Square. Okay, the Berlin Wall will fall beginning November 9th, 1989. Now, Reagan had that famous speech to Gorbachev. He says, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. But the Berlin Wall collapsed in Bush's administration. But Bush doesn't really get credit for the helping to close out the Cold War. That credit is given to Reagan. Okay, so October 3rd, 1990, and people remember. Germany will officially reunify October 3rd, 1990. Remember, this was never supposed to go on this long. In 1945, Germany was divided to help Germany rebuild and get back up on its feet. But things went sideways, and what evolved was an East Germany and a West Germany, and that Berlin Wall was put around West Berlin in the 1960s. And it takes until 1989 for that wall to physically come down. In 1990 for Germany to unify as one country. There's a link in here that you can click. If it doesn't work, again, just pull up Berlin Wall coming down. Currently Germany is probably is the major country in Europe, especially now that Great Britain has, they're in their Brexit phase. They have broken away from the EU. Germany is basically they're the powerhouse in Europe now. And their Prime Minister, Chancellor Merkel, female. Woohoo! Okay. All right. Again, Bush, just like every president before him in this nuclear age, negotiating arms. Making sure that everything's on an even keel and everybody's communicating. Okay. Hold on, let me check my thing. Yes, it's recording. All right, Operation Just Cause was the removal of Manuel Noriega. Okay, Manuel Noriega, this is him right there. He was a dictator in Panama, but he was also responsible for pumping a lot of drugs into our country. Okay, I'm going to go back. All right. And so we're going to remove him from power. And it's called Operation Just Cause. Now, why is this so significant? Well, we're intervening. Well, and it's not even that we're intervening. I think we pressed charges against him for drug running and all this other stuff. But it's an interesting takedown because he seeks refuge in the Vatican. He runs to the Vatican embassy and seeks asylum. And the United States will use psychological warfare. They're going to blast the Vatican embassy for 24 hours a day. And I think they did it for maybe a week. Okay. To the point where, it could drive someone crazy, because what you're trying to do is make sure that they can't sleep. So they would play, I guess maybe some of the most screechiest hard rock things with the bass, things that would just kind of get like an earworm, gets into your ear and you just cannot turn it off. It's been, I don't think they use it anymore. I think it's been outlawed since then, but it worked to kind of help get Manuel Noriega out of the Vatican embassy. I'm sure the people in the Vatican embassy were not happy with it either. Okay, but that's Manuel Noriega. He passed away in 2017. I think I looked that up. Don't quote me on that. I may be off. 2015. Okay, he was in a Supermax. All right. In February 1990, South Africa released Nelson Mandela, who had been in prison for 26 years for fighting against the policy of apartheid. Okay. Apartheid is a system of discrimination and oppression that is very similar to our Jim Crow policies. Okay. The strange thing, though, is that apartheid in South Africa, now I'm not saying strange as in it happening, I'm just talking about the timeline. It doesn't really kick in until like the mid-1940s. So it's like the mid-1940s through February of 90, they are under an apartheid system. And as they are creating their apartheid system, within 10 years of their creating the apartheid system in South Africa, we're going to be trying to demolish our Jim Crow policies here in the United States. Okay. But it's very, very similar. So apartheid and Jim Crow are like the flip side of the coin. 4 years later, Nelson Mandela will be elected as president of South Africa. Nelson Mandela was much beloved by the country, by South African people. South Africa, why was he in prison? He was in prison because he was viewed as a terrorist. He carried out attacks against the apartheid South African government. So he was viewed as a terrorist. But the world outside of South Africa, the people that didn't agree with apartheid, they saw him as a hero. And that's how a lot of times when we're watching television, we're watching the news, and we see people like, to us, Osama bin Laden was the devil incarnate. But to some others, to many others, he was seen as a hero. That, depending on the side of this, on what side of the situation you are, that kind of helps determine your outlook and your opinion on particular instances. So in South Africa, as far as the government was concerned, Nelson Mandela was a hardened criminal. But to the world, he was Nelson Mandela, fighting for his rights. To his people in Africa, he was Makiba. They loved him, okay? And it was a sad day when he died. He was like one of the elders, okay? One of the world's elders had passed away, okay? All right, now Daddy Bush finds a war it lands in his lap, okay? It's August of 91, and Saddam Hussein has invaded his neighbor, Kuwait. And so, led by the U.S., the UN will go into Kuwait, I apologize, to push Iraq soldiers back into their country, oust them out of Kuwait. All right. I remember the day this happened. I was living, it was my junior year in college. I was coming back from a night class, and I got off the elevator and I was on my dorm floor, and someone says, "We're at war." Well, I thought they were talking like we're at war with another floor. I don't know, balloon fight. I don't know, something goofy. And she's like, "No, we're at war." And I will never forget that. And I was like, oh my goodness. Of course, I go back to my room and turn on the news. All right. But it was a very brief war, 4 months. And the goal of the war was to remove the Iraqi soldiers, military, out of Kuwait. Okay, and people, that little tiny country right there, you see the country, the arrow, that's Iraq, and the country that it's pointing to is Kuwait. So Kuwait is a tiny little blip. Now, why did the Iraq invade Kuwait? One of the reasons, Saddam Hussein says that Kuwait was stealing oil from Iraq, that they were side drilling. Okay. Also, I think there was allegations that Iraqi women in Kuwait were being mistreated. Some other stuff, just bad politics, bad diplomacy, the whole kit and caboodle. Okay. All right, so the war is only 4 months long. Hold on a second. Let me see something. Okay, the war is only 4 months long, but it's disastrous. But also, Bush gets a lot of criticism because we are successful. The UN, the U.S. is successful in getting, and it is a UN war, but it's kind of spearheaded by the U.S. We are successful in getting the Iraqi soldiers, military out of Kuwait, but it leaves, Kuwait's in shambles, parts of Iraq is in shambles. But Bush takes criticism because a lot of people wanted him to go one step further and remove Saddam Hussein from power. And he says that's not our objective. Our objective was to remove Iraq out of Kuwait, to get them out of Kuwait. That's why we went in, and therefore we were successful. But some people said, oh, he didn't finish the job. Oh, he was weak. He didn't get this. Bush just kind of, it was, people just wasn't pleased with Bush. I mean, he didn't have a bad administration. I mean, he had a lot of successful things happen, but a lot of people just never really kind of gave Bush credit for anything. Okay. All right. The Soviet Union collapses. After a failed coup in August of 91 to remove him from power, Gorbachev will step down. Okay. 12/25/91. And December 26th, the Russian Federation will emerge under elected leader Boris Yeltsin. All right. So the Soviet experience was over. So from the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918, 1919 through 1991, that's how long the Soviet Union lasted. So if you look at a map and of World War I, you're not going to see the Soviet Union. You look at a map in 1950, that map's going to say the Soviet Union. You look at a map today, it's going to go back to Russia. So that's why I love maps. I'm always telling you all to look at the maps, study the maps, be familiar with the maps, be able to work your way around. I mean, you don't have to have the map, the world countries literally embedded in your brain, but be able to, when somebody says a country, you can kind of mentally say, okay, I kind of know what direction it's in. Okay, I'm familiar with where it is. Okay. Oh, yeah, I know. I kind of have an idea of where the Ukraine is. I have a general understanding of where Mongolia is. Yeah, okay. I know where all of my stand countries are. That's kind of that's the kind of the working knowledge that you need to have of the map. Okay. Or when somebody says, talks about Africa, you understand that Africa is a continent. It's not a country. It's a continent with 52 countries, 53 countries. So you have to be, there's not one language. There's not one people. Okay. So, but anyway, the Soviet Union will no longer exist after after 91. It's over. Boop, kaput. All right. We're back to being Russia again. All right. Under Bush's administration, the American with Disabilities Act will extend basic civil rights to the handicapped and people. This is huge because this is an extension of the civil rights movement. Okay. Remember, the civil rights movement opens up the door. It kind of provides constitutional protection for just about everybody. But there's still some groups, some demographics that have kind of slipped through. And the handicap was one of those demographics that kind of slipped through. So this is huge. American with Disabilities Act. And this begins to, this just kind of allows Americans that are physically handicapped to be a little bit more independent, to be able to go to the restroom on their own in public, to be able to enter a building and go to the third floor and fourth floor, to be able to go to the water fountain, things that we take for granted that can sometimes kind of hinder or determine what they can and can't do. You go into a movie theater now. There's wheelchair spots, right there when you walk in on the main floor before you go up the stairs. They have the spots right there for the wheelchairs. Okay, so things that we don't think about because it may not pertain to us, but that for physically handicapped it really did. So this is huge. This is a great win for Bush. All right, so Bill Clinton comes up to the election of 1992. And the three people running were going to be Bush, he's a Republican incumbent, Clinton, he's the Democratic nominee, and Ross Perot. Ross Perot was a viable third-party candidate. When I say viable, I mean he had the potential initially to give the two major tickets, the two major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, a run for their money. But he kind of fizzles out, okay? All right? We're looking at the political map. We can see how the map, panned out. So, George W. Bush wasn't a runaway election, but Clinton will defeat George W. Bush. And so he's only going to be a one-term president, okay? That's Ross Perot. He says, hear that loud sucking sound. He's talking about NAFTA. Here's Bush. Pack up Hillary. Come on, Democrats. We're going to the Washington. Here's Bush talking about, I hope they remember the Grenada, the Persian Gulf War, the ADA. Okay. Now, why did Bush not get a second term? Most economists and historians will say, what did Bush in was this. When Bush was running in 1988 for president, he said, I will not raise taxes. Because our economy appeared to be booming in Reagan's administration. But there were cracks in it. It was fractured. But nobody was really paying attention to it. So when Bush is like one of these people, hey, he believes our economy's doing good. Hey, the president said it's doing good. The Wall Street seems happy. Everything seems to be on a pretty even keel. We must be doing pretty good. But when he takes office, he realizes, hey, this is kind of ugly. So when he made that promise, now I don't know why Reagan didn't say, hey, don't make that promise. Hush. Don't tell them you're not going to raise taxes. Nobody in the Reagan administration apparently told Bush, it ain't as good as it seems. So Bush gets out there and I'm not going to raise taxes, but he did. Okay? And that combined with not seeming to have a strong domestic policy, because the things, if you notice, that we looked at, most of them was foreign policy. Okay? And maybe stuff really that didn't even pertain to him directly. Okay, so Bush doesn't really just look, everybody's like, it's time for a change. The Republicans have been in there for 12 years now. It's time for a change. We want to go in a different direction. We want to go younger. Okay, we want to go, we want a baby boomer in there. Let's put a boomer in there. And I'm not being funny, but since people just so much talk about baby boomers and millennials, okay? All right. So Daddy Bush, after everything is said and done, did not have a bad presidency. I guess some people just didn't think it was great, okay? It didn't have shock and awe. I don't know what it was, all right? But he's going to be a one-term president. Oops, sorry. So this brings us to Clinton. Clinton's going to be a two-term president, and his VP is Al Gore. Now, Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, she's the one responsible for putting ratings on video games. I mean, she pushed for legislation to put ratings on video games and music. Okay, prior to Clinton's administration, music and video games, video games are still, they're getting popular. Okay, there's gaming systems and stuff like that. Now, they didn't have nothing near what y'all have today as far as the graphics and the realistic look and all the cussing and stuff that they have in there. I mean, we're talking about when I was in it, we played Mario Brothers. I mean, that was dun 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 dun. Oh, it was great. All right, but music, we're getting into, they're talking about, oh, gangster rap is crass and hard rock, they use profanity. So his wife is responsible for putting ratings. Also, Reagan's wife is the responsible for DARE. Okay, the DARE programs in high school, in education systems to steer kids away from drugs. And I am a kid that the DARE program did scare me away from drugs. All right, so here we are with Clinton. So his VP is Al Gore. All right, George Bush will help negotiate NAFTA. Clinton will sign it into law. And NAFTA is basically creating a partnership between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, meaning that we trade with each other without tariffs. I think, to my knowledge, to my working understanding, there's the barriers is kind of like we work together as one economy. Now, we don't have the same currency. Okay, we all do our different things, but we've made it kind of hassle free for our countries to cooperate with each other, economically cooperate with each other. And the NAFTA was kind of like our answer to the European Union. The EU, even though you have umpteenth countries in Europe, economically they act as one country. That's why most of them use the euro. Okay, now Great Britain is no longer a part of the EU, but even when they were a member of the EU, they still kept their money. They kept their own currency. Okay, they kept their own currency. All right, and so the NAFTA was our answer to the EU. One of the criticisms of NAFTA, though, is that it allowed American businesses to go move their companies, their corporate offices, their factories and stuff, move them south of the border where they didn't have to comply with environmental restrictions, labor unions, wages, and stuff like that. Okay, and that's a huge criticism of NAFTA. All right, that's why that picture of the three candidates in the 1992 election, Perot says you hear a sucking noise. He was talking about all of our jobs going down south of the border because, companies would not have to adhere to regulations. And a lot of that has been true. Or some of our jobs have gone overseas to other places. All right. The Republicans will sweep the 1994 midterm elections and will implement their agenda called Contract with America. People, Republicans hated Clinton. I mean, it was palpable. You could feel just watching the news, hearing people talk about about Clinton. The Republicans hated Clinton. I think I may have just said Reagan. I apologize if I did. Hold on, wait a minute. I'm sorry. What am I doing? They hated Clinton. And that dude right there in the front, the prominent dude, his name is Gingrich, Newt Gingrich. And I mean, he is going to go after Clinton. And after Clinton. And it's just kind of like a dog with a bone. They just do not like each other. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right. Clinton will send troops into situations based on humanitarian reasons. For example, Serbia, Haiti, and Somalia. All right, people, this is huge. By saying now that we will go to war on humanitarian reasons, this is saying the United States won't sit back. We're not going to wait to get attacked. And we will interject ourselves into situations that do not directly pertain to us. We will not sit on the sidelines while we're watching a country's government run roughshod over the people. Okay? So humanitarian reasons was now a reason of why we would go into war. And that's kind of what it is. And that's kind of justification why presidents, since Clinton, if they find themselves getting into a situation, it's like, hey, we're just not going to sit back and watch a government just run over its people. That's kind of the humanitarian war. That's the argument that President Obama uses when we go into Libya, when NATO goes into Libya to help oust Muammar Gaddafi. People said that has nothing to do with us. But this man is talking about gunning down the protesters in the streets. President Obama says we can't have that. We just can't sit back and watch that happen. Okay? All right. On February 26, 1993, Islamic extremists blew up a truck bomb at the World Trade Center, lower parking area, and it killed several people. Actually, it killed 6 people. 5 people who were eating in an underground, they were eating in their cafeteria, in a little lunch area off the parking garage, I think on the 5th floor, 6th floor. One of the people eating was a woman who was pregnant, and her pregnancy was considered viable, meaning had she gone into labor, had she delivered her baby, could her baby have survived? Yes. So they charged the people that with the World Trade Center, they charged them with the murder of 6 people, okay? And it injured nearly 1,000. Now, this is not a direct attack by Al-Qaeda. The man that carried this out, the orchestrator of this, I think he trained with Al-Qaeda, but he was not like a member of Al-Qaeda. So this is not something that is directly credited to Al-Qaeda, but this is very Al-Qaeda-esque, okay? This is very Al-Qaeda-esque. But a lot of people, when 9/11 hit, they were like, oh, I forgot that we got attacked in 93. I don't know how they forgot, because, when it happened, again, I'm glued to the news. I'm watching it like, wait a minute, this is crazy. And then when you go back and when they looked at the timeline of the bombing of the World Trade Center in February of 1993, and the months leading up to it, there were so many, what's the word I'm looking for? There were so many clues that something was amiss. There were so many missed opportunities on behalf of the government. City government, federal government. It's just like, I don't know if we didn't give credit to that anybody could carry this out. There was just kind of glaring like horns going off, and everybody just kind of missed the clues, missed the signs. Okay. So this is kind of a wake-up call, but the war on terror hasn't started yet. This is a wake-up call, and they will eventually arrest people that are responsible for it. Okay. And that's why when the World Trade Center came down on 9/11, everybody's like, oh my God, we should have seen this coming. They tried to do this in February of 93. All right, Waco siege. In Waco, Texas on February 28th, 1993, people just love February. A 51-day standoff will begin between David Koresh and the federal government, the FBI, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Administration, the DEA. It was discovered that Koresh, his compound in Waco, they were kind of stockpiling weapons. They were buying a lot of weapons, and so there was the FBI and the ATF and the DEA. They kind of like begin to, I don't know if DEA, I think they are involved too in some small way. DOD, I'm sorry. Yeah, DEA, I was right. They're kind of like, wait a minute, something's wrong with this. And so trying to deliver a warrant trying to at least get into the compound turns into a 51-day siege. People, Hollywood could not have scripted this. We are glued to the television, just watching it, like streaming. This was streaming. This is my first experience at streaming, just streaming, because it was on 24 hours a day, because for 51 days, this is where everybody's focus was on. It eventually results in the FBI, an attack on the compound. They will move in on the compound. I think David Koresh sets it on fire. He's the father of several. He let a lot of the people go, but he kept back the people, his children, the children that he actually fathered. It was a cult. And he will be responsible for their deaths. Of course, people blame Waco. They say, it was the government's fault for trying to go in and dictate what kind of weapons and stuff this compound could have. Very interesting, extremely interesting. Go look it up. I encourage you to go look it up, because I have not done it justice, okay? But I remember the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, Janet Reno. She's the one that had to kind of sign off on giving the go-ahead. Yes, you can kind of go in. So her and Clinton were coordinating, and Janet Reno kind of gave the go-ahead to let that attack, or them going in, which resulted in chaos. Okay, now, Why do you bring up Waco? Because even though this was huge, Waco will lead to the worst case of homegrown terrorism to hit our country. Hold on, let me check that I'm recording. Okay, to hit our country. All right. A right-wing zealot, Timothy McVeigh, a man, he went into the armed forces. He was angry with the government. He was a Gulf War veteran. He's angry with the government. No one really knows exactly what he's angry about. He and a friend, his conspirator, his terrorist in arms, Terry Nichols, they will plot and pick out the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, and they will scope it out. And on April 19th, which just passed, which was this, Sunday, parked a car van loaded with explosives in front of the federal building. This was heinous, just period, for just an American attacking other Americans. But what made it even more horrible was that there were children in a building. It was a daycare. And the fact that there was evidence, they know for a fact that they scoped the building out. They knew that there was a daycare in that building. And I think 18 of the children people killed were babies. Okay. One mother lost both of her children in this bomb, attack. After a manhunt, Timothy McVeigh is captured. His co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, is captured. Timothy McVeigh will get a life sentence and will be executed. And this is the worst case of domestic terrorism in our country's history. And even with 9/11, this still stands as the worst case of domestic terrorism. And domestic terrorism, people, it's homegrown. Okay? Now, hold on a second. Okay. And McVeigh will cite the Waco siege as a major reason for the action. So the bomb goes off on the 51st day of the Waco siege, when everything turned ugly. On the anniversary, that's 2 years later, that's when Timothy McVeigh will attack the federal Murrah building. Today, there's a memorial of the 168 people that were killed. That picture right there, the fireman carrying the baby, that was on every newspaper across the country. And I mean, and the reason why domestic terrorism is so scary for a lot of people is that, our country, especially right now, is extremely xenophobic. If you're foreign, if you got brown or black skin, you are suspect. That's not opinion, that's fact. We don't think about the kid, mowing the lawn. We don't think about the kid next door. So you have the Timothy McVeigh. You have Klebold and Harris, who in 97 will attack their high school at Columbine. We're going to have a spat of school shootings. And these school shootings, a lot of these are carried out, not all of them, but most of them are carried out by white males. So this idea of, people, they're not suspect. And so sometimes they don't always have their guard up. And when they let their guard down, that's when they're the most vulnerable. So nobody's thinking that the federal Murrah building is going to get attacked. The Columbine's not in this PowerPoint, but I'm mentioning it because people didn't think to have their guard up against their own classmates. That's why school shootings are so, because, you got classmates and they come in, you're like, hey, what's going on? And then they pull out weapons. You didn't have your guard up. That's why domestic terrorism is so scary, because we don't have our guard up. And then also, we always think terrorists are going to look different than us. We always think, oh, they're going to be brown skin. They're going to be dark skin. They're going to look like this. They're going to have an accent, yada, yada, yada. When it could be the person next door, the boy next door. And that's the scary thing about domestic terrorism. All right. Now, Clinton, up to this time, during Clinton's administration, there had only been one person that had ever been impeached, and that was Andrew Johnson. But Clinton will find himself making horrible history when he becomes the second president in U.S. history to be impeached. Now, a lot of people don't understand that when a president is impeached, it doesn't mean automatically mean they were removed from office. That means the House of Representatives found them guilty of charges of this, abuse of this, obstruction of this and this, that and that. Okay? So Andrew Johnson was impeached because Congress said he fired somebody he didn't have the authority to. All right? He stays in office, I believe, by one vote. He's able to keep his presidency. Bill Clinton, he was nowhere near being removed from office by the Senate. But it was still an embarrassment. All right, so let's talk about this. So in Clinton's administration, remember I told you the Republicans hated Clinton. Clinton was a good president. He was a good communicator. He was, let me back that up. Let me walk that back a little bit. He was an extremely popular president. Okay, an extremely popular president. Questionable morals because the impeachment was brought on because of an affair, okay, that he was carrying on while president of the United States. So you can say there was questionable morals. But what had happened, how all of this even transpired is a special prosecutor has been appointed to look into a real estate deal that Clinton and his wife, First Lady Hillary Clinton, had been a part of. And in looking in the looking into, I think it was Whitewater. It was the Whitewater real estate, and there was some belief that the Clintons had received some insider, some tips or hints from somebody that this Whitewater real estate deal was going to pan out and make money. So some people, I think the accusation was that they benefited from their political position. Okay. In the meantime, Clinton is also being sued by a woman named Paula Jones. And Paula Jones, her attorneys get a phone call from someone who says, hey, y'all need to ask Clinton about a woman named Monica Lewinsky. So Clinton is being deposed. So he's sworn in. This is not going on in any court, but he does give testimony. And so Paula Jones's attorneys ask him, hey, Clinton, do you know a chick named Monica Lewinsky? He's like, oh, I don't think, she doesn't seem familiar. No, I don't think I know her. Or if I know her, yeah, she's an intern. But no, I never had anything to do with her. Nothing sexual or anything like that. Boom, they got him. They caught him in a lie. So the attorneys for Paula Jones, the woman that is bringing suit against Bill Clinton, and he's being sued because she says when he was governor of California, he sexually assaulted her or intimidated her into having sex or something to that effect. And I'm not making light of it. I can't really, off the top of my head, can't really recall exactly what Paula Jones's lawsuit was about. But her attorneys got in touch with the special prosecutor that had been appointed to look into the Whitewater real estate deal. And so the attorney, the special prosecutor is Ken Starr, one of the same an attorney that defended Trump in his impeachment. All right, so he's on the other side of the aisle now when it comes to Trump's impeachment. But anyway, he's a special prosecutor. So he is tipped off by the Paula Jones defense team that we believe that President Clinton lied to us and he was under oath. And that's kind of how that whole can of worms opened up. And if it sounds convoluted as I'm saying it, it was convoluted. That's kind of how it was coming at us. And people, this was also on the dawn of the internet. People are getting computers in their homes and they're connecting them to the internet. And so this is one of the first times that, it's like people are getting information that they're getting bombarded with information, things that the news isn't even telling them. And Monica Lewinsky will come out and say she was the first case of cyberbullying because all of this happened and people had internets now, and boy, she caught Hades. So after everything was said and done, Bill Clinton was asked. He said nope. He even got on the news and told the country, I have not had relations with that woman. Told the whole country that. And the country was like, well, Bill said he didn't have sex with her. And come to find out, he did. But what happened was, and there was DNA proof to back up the accusation that there was a sexual tryst between the two. When asked about it, he says, oh, well, what we did, I didn't consider it sex, so I didn't consider that a lie. That's the lawyer in him. He knew how to muddy the waters. He knew how to kind of walk that fine line. Okay? All right. So he's impeached by the House of Administration, by the House of Representatives, and it goes to the Senate, and the Senate's like, nah, we know this was almost like a personal axe to grind because the Republicans disliked him so much. It's like they couldn't get him on the white water, so we'll get him on getting his swerve on in the Oval Office. Okay? A lot of people in Congress, a lot of the people that despised him still voted to keep him in because some of them would come back and say, look, even though we didn't like him or what have you, what he was being impeached for really was a personal issue. And that was between him and his wife. That's his family issue. And it's not really something that we should have been able to pass judgment against. What have you. I guess they didn't want to be hypocrites because they had women on the side too. I don't know. All right. So Clinton kind of comes away from this. He puts on a brave face. He smiled, never stopped smiling, never stopped waving. But the people close to him said he was humiliated. And to this day, is still just humiliated by the fact that he is on that short list of presidents to be impeached. I mean, there's only 3 people on the list out of 45 presidents. So it's not a club that most people enjoy being a part of. Okay. Now, the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, people, this is when things really start heating up. This is when the war on terror really begins to crank up. So now, remember, the Cold War is over. As of 91, the Cold War is over. Here we are, though. The war on terror will shortly begin right after that. So in 98, August 7th, simultaneously, 2 embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in East Africa, they are bombed. 200 people were killed. And Al-Qaeda is going to, I don't know if Al-Qaeda comes out and says, yeah, we did it, but they can trace it to Al-Qaeda. So this is the first direct attack, not by way of individuals that had trained with Al-Qaeda or were familiar with Al-Qaeda. This was the first attack by Al-Qaeda. And people are in the embassy trying to get visas. People are in the embassy that are working. You have Marines in there. I mean, you had a lot of people in there. They had nothing to do with the United States government. They might have been U.S. citizens or people trying to, for whatever reason. So the 200 people that were killed, you can rest assured that most of them, those 200 people hadn't done nothing. They just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Okay. All right, and then the USS Cole was attacked, killing 17 sailors and injuring 39. And this was the U.S. Cole. Wait a minute, I thought I had changed that. The USS Cole was attacked. Let me see. I thought I had fixed this. Let's see. I sure did. I thought I put that in there. 1993, USS Cole right here. October 12th, the USS Cole was attacked. This is a month before the election of 2000. And there is no response by the United States. Okay, Al-Qaeda claims responsibility. And I don't know if they claimed responsibility immediately, but in the years since, so this is October 2000. In the years since, the 17 families of the sailors that were killed, they had brought a lawsuit against Sudan because the Sudan is where Al-Qaeda had orchestrated this attack. And there was a lawsuit that got tossed out by the Supreme Court and all this other stuff. But as of recently as 2019, the Sudanese government agreed to pay them out to kind of get them off a list of terrors and stuff like that. Okay, a list of terrorist countries and stuff like that. All right, so a lot went on. You can see a lot has gone on in the administrations of Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. Okay, and we know that with the election, the 2000 election, up until today, it has been a roller coaster. Okay, it has been a true roller coaster ride. So those are our three presidents that we were talking about for this particular unit. And unlike the last unit where I gave you the option of generating questions, I will create the questions that I want you to answer for this particular assignment, because those other questions that y'all turned in, the majority of you, not all of you, but the majority of you turned in, they were whack. I'm sorry, they were. Okay, and y'all know they were whack. Questions that it does not, where was Nixon born? Who cares? Where does that matter? That's good to know, but that's not going to come up on a test or anything like that. Okay, so they were truly whack. Hope everybody has, like I said, had a nice spring break. I will attach the assignment. I will probably put the questions up tomorrow, and then give you about 2 weeks to get it done. I do understand that you have other classes that are hitting you up. Some of you may only have four classes that are hitting you up. You maybe had P or something. I don't know. But I do understand that a lot of you have some other stuff going on, so you can't just be glued to your, for 2 hours, 3 hours a day. So I'll put the questions up tomorrow that I want you to answer, and then I will put up probably another assignment, and then you have about 2 weeks to get it in. Okay, I am thinking about y'all. I really do miss y'all. Love y'all. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask me.